Well, hello everyone. My name is Chabot, and we're here for the Social Web Fireside Chat. We got quite a lineup here today. Superstars within Google are working on the social web. We're missing one. He's going to be joining us pretty soon, but I figured we'd start with a general introduction. So if you'd like to all introduce yourself, let's start from left to right. So DeWitt, if you want to kick it off.
Hi, I'm DeWitt Clinton, and I'm an engineer. Work on a number of different products in our developer focus area, and a lot of that overlaps with social. I'm also a prolific buzzer, and if you go to my buzz feed right now, it's you can find it at profiles.google.com/dclinton. I started a thread of people asking questions, and you can feel free to use that to ask questions. And I brought my laptop up, and I'll be reading it. So,
if you can pass the microphone,
I'll take both. I'm Joseph Smarr. I'm a social web engineer at Google as well. Joined in January. Previously, I was CTO at Plaxo, so I've been working on open standards and interoperability for the social web for a long time, and very excited about where we've gotten and where we're going.
My name's Todd Jackson. I'm a product manager working on Google Buzz and Gmail.
David Glazer, engineering director. Been working on different social things at Google, starting with Open Social a couple years ago.
Hi, I'm Sami Shalabi. I'm an engineer on the Google Buzz APIs and Google Friend Connect.
And if you have one moment, then we have our final guest of today. Drum roll, please.
I switched into the same shirt.
Introduction.
Hi, John Panzer, working on open specifications and on the Buzz APIs.
Mr. Salmon.
Yeah, Mr. Salmon, amongst a lot of other things. So the format for today is pretty casual, like fireside chats are. I'd like to remind you, if you have any questions, if you could please step up to the microphone. Otherwise, we're going to have to repeat them. And we'd like to start up with just an open round. I'm sure that after all the social stuff we talked about these days, you're going to have a lot of questions, either about Buzz or general strategy or anything else. So this is the time to ask them. So who would like to start? Oh. Or I can come to you with a microphone, it's okay.
Hello, I'm Manish. I work at IGN Entertainment on the social platform we are building. And then I noticed in both days, yesterday and today, that no one is mentioning open social at all. So wanted to see what is Google's strategy with open social going forward. Thank you.
David, I think that's a good question for you.
Sure. Actually, the session I came from right before this was a session on open social in the enterprise and some of the traction there. And 2 days ago, there was an open social meetup that was hosted by MySpace in the city. With Good, okay, yeah. I would have been there, but I.O. and you know, the good thing about scheduling that with I.O. is many people were in town. Bad thing is many of us who were busy with I.O. weren't able to attend in person, but Mark and I were, you know, very involved in planning. So, you know, Google's strategy with Open Social is to continue to use it in all the appropriate places. Orchid obviously is heavily using Open Social. iGoogle is using Open Social for all the applications that run on iGoogle. The various APIs that the Wire APIs, where it makes sense for them to be aligned, like POCO, Portable Contacts, are part of Open Social and part of the Buzz APIs. So, you know, the core underlying standards that Open Social and the rest of the social web are built on around OpenID and OAuth are, you know, continuing to be driven pretty hard. So the strategy is continue to use it everywhere it makes sense, which is a bunch of places, and continue to work with all the other folks who are using Open Social and other relevant standards to keep the standards moving towards the ball and keep the ball moving towards the standards.
Yeah, I might just add that opening up the social web is a multi-pronged approach. There's a lot of different aspects of identity and sharing and on-site and off-site and so forth. And so anyone who's followed this space for a while knows it's a somewhat messy and frothy cacophony of different overlapping standards, but they all are aware of each other and trying to play well together. And I think that's actually good because ultimately it gives developers a lot of flexibility in terms of building blocks that they can mix and match together. So you see, for example, you know, OAuth being used with Open Social RESTful APIs and, you know, discovery document. I mean, they're all very interrelated, and I think that's a healthy thing that's going to keep evolving.
Actually, I want to add one point that comes up when we have this conversation internally. And it really brought home when we were chatting about it how quickly things are evolving in the space of the social web. And 2.5 years ago, when Open Social was first introduced by the set of companies that defined that standard, the hottest thing in the social web was running applications inside somebody else's site and putting social applications inside a website. And that was the coolest, hottest, bestest thing, and it was. And that now is one of many interesting things happening on the social web, and it's far from the middle of the action. It's one of many important things. So the technology that the Open Social Standards community and the Shindig implementation has invested most heavily in really nails that problem. And anywhere that somebody is trying to solve that problem, whether it's in the classic social sense in something like ORCID, in a sort of extended sense in somewhere like LinkedIn or somewhere like iGoogle, or whether it's more in an enterprise space, which is the analogous thing, where it's something like Atlassian has refactored their entire suite of development tools based on Open Social. Anywhere that is the problem, that is the answer. But the social web has become bigger than that one problem, so the set of answers is bigger than that one standard.
And we had one question in the buzz as well that was kind of related to it. What are your experiences with implementing these fast-moving standards compared to implementing standards coming out of the standard bodies? Have there been a lot of interoperability issues? Are you having difficulties landing on the right spec version?
So, I mean, as we were implementing the Buzz APIs, one of the things that was apparent is there's a lot of good movement in the standard space, but the standards are still young. And we're trying to build something that is immediately useful to people so that they can do very interesting things with the Buzz infrastructure. However, we've had to introduce additional extensions to the existing standards. And one of our goals is to try to remove every proprietary extension to these standards so that it allows anyone to become a core component or a core player in the social web.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Any questions? Anybody? We're going back here. If you could walk up to the microphone.
I was just wondering if there's any plans for us to see some of these social applications within the new Google TV framework.
Oh, good question. Interesting. Who wants to take it?
How many people in the audience are thinking of building apps for Google TV? How many of you think you might build some social features into those apps?
There you go. Cool.
That's one of the advantages of building on the web as the platform is, like, does Google TV support OpenID? Yes, it does. Why? Because the web supports OpenID. I mean, I think that's actually kind of nice that we didn't have to do anything special to make that work.
Cool. Next question? Well, while you think about it, I'll take one from the buzzes we've been getting. What are the benefits of using these open standards? Do you find that it's more difficult? Are you slower going? Having troubles coming up with specifications with a community? Are there benefits to doing open, or would a closed system be better?
Yes, to all of the above.
That's a leading question, Chris.
Yeah, I know.
No, we hate open here, right? No, so I mean, the decision was made really early on with Buzz to go all in on the open side of this. I mean, I think for everybody here, there's a desire to see what we're doing in Buzz, what we're doing in Open Social, implementable literally by everybody. So it should not be a Google thing. So even if it was a little more difficult, and in some cases it is actually a lot more difficult to implement to a community-led, openly licensed spec, it's an investment that we're willing to make, and that we feel like we get more out of it by investing up front and saying, hey, let's do activity streams, let's do POCO, let's do Meteor RSS, knowing that what we'll end up with is a network of sites and implementations rather than just Google. So harder, yes. Worth it, absolutely. Like, I don't think anyone up here has any regrets about this strategy. So.
just, I mean, we do get benefits from it too, right? I mean, for example, take something like OAuth 2.0, which is being worked on right now as sort of a next generation way of accessing private data securely, and it's a lot simpler for developers. There was lots of really smart people outside of Google who worked on that. We obviously have been working on it too, and so we get all the advantage of all of that insight, all of that field experience, all of that trial and error, and of course, all of the developers who start using OAuth maybe to work with a property other than Google, and then they come to Google and realize they already know how to build that, especially since those sort of plumbing layers tend to be the hard part to get right. And it's not the fun part. The fun part is what you build on top of it. And so I think we absolutely see the benefits of it as well, and that's why it's worth investing. I mean, no one would think today to set up a web API that wasn't over HTTP, right? I mean, it's even sort of silly to ask, but in a way, that's kind of what we're building now for the social layer.
I agree with all of that. The one thing I want to add is, because there were a couple of different threads in that question as asked, is that there was a comment about standard and there was a comment about interoperable. And I want to say that, at least in my opinion, one of those is very clearly a means and one is an end, right? The end is the maximum choice and interoperability. That's the goal, right? And it just so happens that the best way that I know or that I've seen in any industry to allow maximum choice and interoperability is open standards, because everyone knows what to build and everyone knows that if they build it, they'll be allowed to use it. And you need both of those to be true. And the goal is get maximum interoperability, which is maximum choice. The means is open standards, and that's the best way we know to get there as an industry.
Cool. Thank you. We have a question.
Hi, my name is Neil. The Twitter Library of Congress deal that was the gift that was announced on the 13th of April kind of got my mind reeling about long-term data retention. Now, I understand that it's open and everybody agrees to the terms of service that our stuff's wide out there, but that type of deal could not be facilitated without a lot of money and a lot of resources on one side and the other. So I guess I was wondering if you could speak to, particularly on the Salmon protocol, if you ever thought of maybe an expiration tag, something that would allow an author at the time of publishing, of posting that data, to put an expiration on it. And second of all, I guess I think about these things in terms of robots.txt for web crawlers, and that there's the no index, no follow convention, and that's on a per page basis, not just in the robots.txt file as a meta tag. I want to kind of visit that idea that there's a possibility this data is retained forever, and that necessarily wasn't the intention. And then the value of that data beyond the real time, now traveling into stale, actually no longer serves a purpose or could serve a different purpose in the future for the author than it was in the context of the real time to interact.
Cool.
So I'll give a quick answer about Salmon and hand it over, because there's a bunch of questions in there. So I think that Salmon is extensible, and you can put a lot of additional metadata in there, and a potential thing might be like newspapers have this as stale after X date, and we're going to ask you to remove it after X date. The one thing about putting data out to the universe is that once you've broadcast it out, you can't be guaranteed anything. Sure. I mean, that's sort of obvious, right? It's like sending radio waves out in outer space. They're out there essentially forever. But you can have signals that tell people how to be polite and how to do the useful things with your data, and the services that are well behaved. If you come to an agreement, they can honor that. So the protocols can allow this. So you can come to an agreement, and then it's up to the services to act on this. And then I think you have a bunch of other questions.
I think that we can summarize part of his question to one of the things that Joseph Smarr and DeWitt Clinton both, I think, have a strong opinion about. Who owns that data? Who gets to make the choice of how long it's retained?
Right. One small comment, and I'll hand it over to Joseph, is I think users should own their own words. I worked on Blogger for a long time. I very firmly believe in that. And they should be able to make these decisions in a fully transparent way, whatever the outcome is.
I think one of the things that's a very complex issue, obviously, and I think I'll throw it over to Todd to talk about, to me, when I hear that, what I think of is one of the things that's weird about technology and communication technology today is that this line between ephemeral conversations and things that last, that stay in the written record has been very blurred, right? And we see this all the time where people use email very ephemerally, but sometimes it sticks around and gets pulled up in legal discovery. Or is chat IM, does that get logged or not? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And why should, is calling on the phone now, transcribing voice calls. Or and people end up hopping to different technologies because they have these different idiosyncratic properties, but really that notion of permanence being per medium is kind of orthogonal, right? It's sort of more, how does the technology work and what policies are around that? And that seems like something where we think about that a lot in the context of Gmail, where it's sort of sometimes synchronous, sometimes asynchronous, sometimes ephemeral, sometimes permanent. And so that must be something you guys have to think about in general, and ditto with Buzz.
In general, with Gmail, Gmail was founded on the idea of users want to store everything for as long as they want to store it, and they shouldn't be forced to delete it or have to separate from the data that they've produced for any silly or artificial reason. I think it is a complex issue, and I think John hit it on the head when he said, if you're producing data that's in the public sphere, it's in the public sphere. There are hints and ways that you can tag it to say, here's how I intend it to be used. I think it's a really sort of elegant solution, and we'll see sort of how it plays out. But yeah, the spirit is that the user owns their data and can hold on to their data or export their data as much as they'd like.
And I guess that's why I'm asking the question, is to hopefully encourage you to think about long-term data retention, because we are just at the cusp of this now. We're launching applications, and I mean, I was sitting on listening to Chris Messina talk and also the PubSub Hub talk. I mean, the amount of data and they're pushing more data than Twitter is pushing, and so again, it's a tiny little piece of metadata, and that robots.txt is not a law. We just obey it because it's a good thing to do. And I'm hoping that maybe I can encourage you guys to think about what can we do that's good for the people, because the providers don't want to do it because, I mean, there's great things that we can do business value-wise for that data to have it long-term retained. But for the users, I just want you guys to think about them.
Cool. Thank you.
Great question.
Next question.
I'm Bud Gibson. I'd like to advocate for a question in DeWitt's Buzz stream, which is, when are we going to start to see Buzz salmon integration? And maybe more broadly, when are we actually going to see salmon doing something? I'm really enthused about the whole idea.
I love this question.
Yeah, I posted the question.
Well, Dear DeWitt.
I'm here to ask for it as an audience member.
I have this friend.
So let me say, I think this is a great question, and I thank you. And yeah, and so very enthusiastic about salmon and Buzz integration. And I'm obviously I'm Mr. Salmon. I'm working on this, and it's something that we hope to do in the future. I can say that we don't have schedules, but we're very, very interested in it. Yeah.
Cool. Excellent question.
I think I would say I think we're proud that. Actually, other companies have implemented it even more quickly than we've gotten around to. We've been working on the specs and I/O, and we demoed this yesterday at our Bridging the Islands talk. That ClickSet and StatusNet and others all have this federation, and I mean that's awesome, because ultimately one of the questions came up before I was going to say is, how, is this hard work? And one of the things is that almost all of these standards we're working on, there's not a ton of code you actually have to write to implement them. It's much more around what is the right interface and what are the right building blocks, and that can be hard to negotiate because this is all very complex and subtle stuff, but the total amount of code you have to write is usually quite small, and we've all tried hard to work to make these as developer friendly as possible. So it's neat when people can take a good idea and just implement it in a day, and we're trying to move as fast as we can, but it's really cool to see people moving even faster, and it's great to see that enthusiasm.
Yeah, I just want to note on the salmon side, it's been great to get the immediate feedback about, oh, this is very easy to implement on all these other platforms that I'm not working on, and this particular thing was hard, so let's change it quickly. So that immediate feedback is very, very valuable, and it may mean that the protocols change a little bit, but it makes them much, much better. And so it's an investment that I think pays off, very well.
And the one other thing I'd add to that is, I guess Buzz is about 100 days old right now, which is in some ways incredible, right? It's a very, very new product. And when we launched it, we made a promise, maybe overpromised, but we wanted to reach for it, which was that when we built an API for this, we were going to build it around a number of protocols that were actually outside Google's control. So we said, we are going to build this around activity streams. We're going to build this around POCO and Meteor RSS and PubSub Hubbub and OAuth and Atom and AtomPub and just sort of promise the world. And that's a gutsy thing, I think, to do as a company, because, of course, that landscape can change on us. So here we are 100 days later, and yesterday we launched the first iteration of the public Buzz API. and it supports POCO and AtomPub and Atom and OAuth and Activity Streams. We haven't implemented Salmon yet. It is our plan, and hopefully we can live up to all those promises that we made early on. So I'm actually amazed, and it's Sami and his team's work that built this API, and I'm a big fan as a user of it. So.
Yeah, John and I checked in just enough code to get the shirt. They did all the hard work.
So just to mix things up a little bit, I'm going to ask a question where I kind of know the answer already, but we're hearing it a lot at the Google I/O. What is the difference between Buzz and Wave? And I think, Todd, you can do a good job at explaining this.
Buzz and Wave, are two products that are good for communication and sort of different flavors of communication, I would say. Wave is a product that's very, very good for collaborative working environments and people working on things together. I think Buzz has a little bit more of a sort of social and sharing flavor to it. It's integrated into Gmail, which is a place where people are sort of talking and chatting and sharing things already. So I think it's sort of a strategy of Google saying we're going to invest in two products that are both communication products, but sort of different flavors of communication products, and seeing how users use them. What are the ways that they're interesting and different from one another.
And going down the road, do you see a point where they will become more integrated?
It's certainly something that we're open to, yeah. And in fact, the two products, while they don't share code, they do borrow a lot of ideas from one another. So one of the things that you saw when we did the version of Inbox, what we call Inbox integration in Buzz, where you get these sort of live emails that come right into your inbox, people comment on them and they sort of drop down in real time right in place. So some of the ideas, things that we saw happening in Wave, we moved over to Buzz.
Awesome. Anybody's got anything to add? DeWitt, you looked passionate for a moment. No? Okay. What's going on around Social Network Federation? And I think that kind of touches on Salmon, but it's a bit of a wider question when you think about identity, relationships, pictures, everything else. So it's a very open question, so anybody who wants to dive in and give their opinion?
Yeah, I don't know how many of you were able to come to the talk that John and I gave yesterday on bridging the islands, but I think besides getting to see Chris Messina's awesome artwork, look for it if you haven't seen it, it's really cool. I think that metaphor is one that really resonates for us, and we've actually talked about it since the days of Open Social, that you first need to be able to get a bunch of islands speaking a common tongue, and then you can bridge those islands and really let people live and travel wherever they want and have it just work. And the metaphor we were trying to go for in our talk was that, if I go move to a new physical location, I should still be able to stay in touch with my family and friends, and I should still be able to share rich information with them. And, you shouldn't feel impoverished because you want to go live in different places. And that feels like the right way for the social web to evolve. Obviously, it's how email has evolved, right? You can use one email provider, I can use another one. It's how cell phones work. It's how a lot of these communication technologies work, and that allows for that innovation and that user choice. And so that's why, again, open standards and interoperability really make that possible. If I can show up and say, hey, I've already got an account here with OpenID and OAuth, if I can use WebFinger to say, here's where else my stuff lives, if I can share information richly with PubSub and Activity Streams so I don't have to dumb it down or slow it down to go between sites, if I can then participate in conversations even when I'm not in the same place as you using Salmon, these technologies all are bridging the islands, and that, I think, is going forward exactly how we want to keep seeing things going.
I'm going to combine this with one other question we've gotten on the Buzz stream, and that is, when is Buzz going to support OpenID?
In which direction?
As a login option.
As a relying party option. I mean, that's definitely the direction we're trying to go. As we've said in the past, Google actually already is, they're talking about being an OpenID relying party, which is saying coming with one of your existing accounts. We already have to do this for a lot of our enterprise customers because we run apps for your domain on lots of domains, and they often have their own login systems. And so, obviously there are a lot of complexities associated with that, but we've been trying to really eat our own dog food there and figure out how to make that work. And of course, I think it has a tremendous application in the consumer space as well.
Cool. Anybody want to walk up to the microphone, or shall I take another one from the Wave or Buzz? We got a question here. Cool.
This is a question on the namespace situation. I mean, I think it's still the case that if I open up a Buzz account, I'm either going to reveal my Gmail address or I'm going to have this giant number that nobody understands. So how's that moving? And also, any clarification on finally moving Buzz out into its own standalone product separate from Gmail?
Both really good questions. So yes, Buzz currently does use the Gmail namespace. We thought that was the best way to start things off, and it makes sense that I own a certain name in the Gmail namespace. I wouldn't want to lose it. right, and to have someone else come along and claim it. So we're still working on some of the issues that have to do with that. But we've heard loud and clear that people, the long string of numbers at the end of your profile is not what people want. They want a name that's friendlier and easier to see. So we're trying to work on that. And your second question was on a standalone Buzz site outside of Gmail. That's also something we're definitely interested in. We've heard loud and clear that people want to come and try this product, and they don't necessarily need a new Gmail address they don't want a new Gmail address in order to do that. So it's something that we're working hard on.
No? Chris Messina, you have a question?
Yeah, hey guys. So I'm actually curious in terms of the relevancy stuff that you guys do in Buzz right now, how that's going to appear either in the API, or will I be able to like dump a bunch of stuff at it and use it in my own apps? Because one of the things that's interesting on the one hand, of course, is you get this activity stream of all this stuff in chronological order. On the other hand, my experience in the Buzz app has a bunch of condensed stuff and things that I imagine are going to be made more relevant to me over time based on different signals. So how can that experience, I guess, be made portable for other people to embed in their external apps?
That's a really good question. And this is something actually we're in the middle of making many, many changes and improvements to. So today, the way that what Buzz works when you view it inside Gmail is that it's sorted by the last comment time. So anytime someone leaves a new comment on an item, it jumps back onto the top. And the reason we did that is because we really like the conversational nature of Buzz. We want the items to be engaging and involve conversation. We are in the process of rethinking that some. One of the things that we really want to do is we want conversations to come back up to the top when they're interesting to you. So because somebody that you're following left a new comment, because the combination of activity that many people have done on something makes it significantly interesting to pop back up to the top for you. So I think you'll see a lot of development in sort of what we call this bumping and personalized bumping. And it's something that we're going to explore a lot in the future. While also, another thing that we've heard from users is, I just want the purely chronological view by post timestamp. So we want to also offer like multiple ways to view the Buzz stream, sort of slice it and dice it. And you'll see sort of those corresponding changes happening into the API. But this is an area of really, I think, of strong interest from the Buzz team. It's something that we're passionate about, and it's something that you'll see us explore a lot.
Thanks. Cool. We have another familiar face with a question.
Yeah,
cool.
Robert Scoble. I keep thinking about malleable social graphs, and the first one that showed me that, the power of that is Foursquare, because if you check in here, you only see people who are near here. Now take that, and there's two different pieces of this question. One is, when are you going to hook up to the other data silos in the web, like Foursquare, like TripIt, like other things that I'm showing the web by my behaviors, my liking behaviors across the web, not just on Buzz? That's one problem. And another problem is, how am I going to discover new people based on their expertise? For instance, if somebody's visited 4 barbecue places in Austin, they've automatically set themselves apart from the crowd and become an authority on Austin barbecue. And I might want, if I'm going to Austin, or if I want to talk about barbecue, I only want to hear from those people. I don't want to hear from the rest of the people who have no freaking clue about barbecue, right? And who haven't demonstrated to the system that they're an authority and credible on barbecue. How are you going to build this malleable social graph to both let us discover new people and see content only from people who are authoritative and credible on the world?
Cool. So I think the question was, do I like barbecue? And the answer is yes.
So how could Robert discover you?
Are you credible on barbecue? And if you are, I want to see your like.
Right.
But if
I'm credible as a
haven't
consumer
visited
of
4 barbecue places, don't show me your thoughts on barbecue.
No, I very much agree with everything you said. When I talk about bridging the islands, one of the things that not only is it so that users have choice to use the tools that they want, but it's so that individual tools can really specialize in individual social experiences. I think Foursquare is a great example of something that, by being its own experience, it can really nail that experience. And I actually choose to associate with a different set of friends on Foursquare than I do on the other tools I use. But of course, I want that to then enrich the rest of the things that I do. And that's, honestly, it's just something that for us has been very early days, but that's absolutely the payoff of allowing all these different sites to flourish. You want to make it really easy for me to go to a place like Foursquare and quickly sign up and find my friends and so forth, and then to use all that check-in history of me and my friends to inform me back on Google. It'd be nice to see it on Google Maps and everywhere else. So that's the one thing, is that I think that absolutely the more that there's two-way data flows, the more everyone wins, really. And then the second point was using that not just based on my current social graph, but actually based on interest and authority. I don't have anything particularly smart to say about that. Maybe other people can, but I guess I would point out that by making the data open, one of the things you let people do is remix it in different ways like that. So maybe Buzz is going to have one way of presenting data to you, and that may or may not be appropriate to try to pivot on other axes, but if the data is available, other apps can try to do that. And I think you've seen a lot of that in the Twitter ecosystem, where they'll take it and provide a completely different view that's not based on timeline, but it's based on keyword or based on a set of people or location. And I think that's a great example of the kind of innovation you can unlock when you let the data free.
Twitter has lists. Are you guys going to do anything like lists? That gives you a baby step along the way to the...
So just to repeat the question, so YouTube picks up on it as well. Twitter has lists as a solution. Do you consider doing something similar?
Yeah, the feature request of some kind of filters or lists or groups, something along those lines is something that we've heard often and something that we're thinking about and working on. Also, just one of the things you mentioned is just the ability to see what you've liked. In Buzz, I can't see what Robert Scoble has liked. That's a feature that we're launching very soon, hopefully like next week or so.
Those are likes only in Buzz, right? They're not like...
That's correct. Right. Yeah, so I think, interoperability is
you could imagine pulling those. I mean, Facebook has APIs for that stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So in theory, all this stuff should flow, and you should be able to aggregate it all together.
We just call those activities, right? The action of liking some entity is an activity, and then as we develop protocols like Salmon, those activities can be federated. So you could imagine a world in which, starring something on Twitter or liking it in Facebook gets propagated to you on whatever network you're on.
It's also a good use case for activity streams, right? Because right now, almost all of the syndication between websites is just RSS and Atom, which don't really have innate notions of things like location or liking, and activity streams do. That's exactly the kind of richer semantics you want, so that I know that a geolocated check-in can be on any service and I can still aggregate it around a map, or that it's a like and I can aggregate that, or it's a shared link, or it's a photo. And, and you don't have to do a custom integration on a per-site basis.
And to follow on that, one of the benefits to users of going and doing all these things and building up this data and making it open, and in some cases just totally public, is that they build up a reputation. And the fact that this stuff is actually linkable to each other is a feature in these cases, because you can build up a reputation as the best person to talk to about barbecue, and it doesn't matter which service it was that you used, and it really shouldn't, because if you build up a reputation somewhere, you should be able to carry that. It should be portable reputation.
One additional point I'd like to add to that is, we're in a space where we have theories on what the answers are going to be, and if you have ideas or things that you want to build based on the social infrastructure that we're building, and what we're building doesn't make that available, it'll be great if you reach out to us so that we can figure out ways to help you build these very new innovative use cases, because not all innovation is going to come out of Google. The beauty of having APIs is that everyone participates in innovating in the space. Yeah. So please reach out.
Cool. Next question.
Yeah, I feel like, first of all, thanks guys, and it's terrific work, and it's great to see all of the new improvements as well and the progress. But I feel like there's this elephant in the room, and it's about to hit 500 million users. Where are we around Facebook and Facebook Connect and Open Graph, right? Would you guys ever think about putting a Facebook Connect button on your sites? If not, why not? How could all of the work that you guys are doing also interoperate well with this enormous monster that's down the road?
Who wants to take it?
No, it's obviously a great question, and it's one where I think there's a lot of good news. Facebook's gotten very involved in a lot of work on open standards, and there's just this Internet Identity Workshop this week, which has been kind of the grassroots place where a lot of us get together and work on these things. And Facebook's one of the most active and forward-thinking participants. In fact they shipped OAuth 2.0 as their authentication mechanism for all the new Graph API stuff, even as it's still in draft. They were one of the first to ship activity stream support in their feeds. So obviously there are a lot of issues to work out in a lot of different dimensions, but I think it's great to see that the platform keeps opening up, it keeps getting more liberal, and it keeps operating for more of these sort of interoperability scenarios to take place. So I think it's a very positive direction.
David?
I'd also add that there are Google apps today, like YouTube, that are well integrated with Facebook and do auto sharing to Facebook. So there are some product by product choices about where it makes the most sense for users. I'd also say that the elephant in the room. There's also the story of the 8 blind men and the elephant. There's Facebook in the area of social. There's many different aspects, and that's why there are many different answers and many different parts of it. And even you asked about the Open Graph API, but you actually probably meant the Graph API, which is much less open than the Open Graph API, and covers a different part of the space. And they're both interesting things, but there's a large set of details to talk about.
One other thing I'd add to that, David's absolutely right. There is actually no Open Graph API. There's an Open Graph protocol and a Graph API. But speaking of open things, I mean, it's definitely in Google's best interest to work with Facebook, work with Twitter, work with all of these elephants to figure out what the common protocols could be. What are the things that could we build? Could we build an Open Connect? Could we build an OAuth, an Open ID? And use all of us working together to help make the web itself more social. I don't think ultimately Google does very well if we get everybody implementing only a very strictly Google-branded version of this stuff. We do much better when the entire web is implementing the same Connect protocol, because that's in our interest. And and I honestly believe it's in a Twitter or Facebook's best interest to do this as well. We'll go out of our way to work with them on these things.
Could you expand a little bit why it's in our best interest?
What's good for the web is good for Google.
It is so simple. I mean, our business was born on the web. It will be on the web forever. The web is much, much bigger than Google. The web is much bigger than Facebook. And to the extent that we can continue to grow the web, Google as a business does well.
Cool.
Plus, I think a lot of us here just personally believe that. Mm-hmm. It's not just the business. Like, we wake up every morning going, "Hey, I want to fight for this. Like, this is exciting."
Cool. Yeah, I was going to say I think what motivates a lot of us personally is just like it's a lot better as a user when your stuff works together, right? I mean, whether that's your TV or your MP3 player or your social networks, and particularly for social networks, it's communication. Everybody's doing different things in different places, and so it would drive me nuts if I could only call other Sprint users on my phone, or only email other Gmail people. I mean, actually, that's the way email used to be. They had to invent the @ symbol, right? Right? I mean, because people are like, doesn't it suck that we can't email these people at Berkeley from Stanford, and talk about the big game? So I think we just have to remember how early we are in this space, and how much turnover there already has been in terms of market share and new companies coming out all the time, and I don't see that stopping at all. And I want to use social on a zillion different websites and have it all work.
Cool. One thing I just want to add to that is you say how early we are, but how far we've come. I mean, it is amazing. I mean, if you think back just a couple years ago, you had AOL or Friendster, these sites didn't federate or talk to each other at all. I don't even know if they had APIs. I mean, it was not, you couldn't possibly do it. And now we're at the point where we have, these incredible container formats. So we have Atom and AtomPub. We have a notion of expressing these activities. We've invented WebFinger. We have PubSub Hubbub. Activity streams are real. In just a couple of years, we've gone from zero interop in the social space to it's almost working, and big pieces of it already are working. So if you look at the trajectory, and I love looking at trajectories of things, not where we are right now, where we were 6 months ago and a year before that, and where can we predict we're going to be, in a very short amount of time, we will have this holy grail of I should be able to mention, Joseph on a completely different network, from Google Buzz. It should just work. And, I predict that that's very, very close.
And I'd like to ask for a quick expansion on that to tie it into a question we had on the wave. And that is, how do you feel the Buzz launch has affected this situation? How do you feel that launching Buzz has driven this forward? Has it affected the development of the open and social web? Has it done a lot of good for these protocols? Is it a good use case?
Well, it changed everything.
All right. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, one, it's a social network I like, and no, I mean, I think it opened up a new opportunity for saying how could we do some long-form communication, and so as a product, even, I think it was, and I can say this because I didn't work on building the product itself. I'm saying this as a fan. I think it's a very good product. What I do think maybe drew a line in the sand was we are going to build the API for Buzz around open protocols. You know, we'll take that risk. We'll, you know, embrace that challenge. And I do think that raises the bar. I think it forces other companies to maybe justify why they wouldn't use a open protocol if we've proven that it can be done.
Yeah, I think it's also just much harder to innovate from arm's length. So I'm really glad we had this question saying, hey, when are you going to ship salmon? I mean, how would we ship salmon if we didn't have Buzz, right? So I think it's really good to actually have a platform where you have to work all these things out. And I think, and the point is we've taken a strategic attitude from day one that we want this to be one of many islands that are well bridged so that it can be great, but it can kind of do what it does and, you know, and everybody benefits.
Cool. Yep. Cool. Next question.
One of the questions I have, and I'm not certain it's even a programmable question, which makes it difficult, is that when I think about just the way I interact with people in the real world, I might be friends with, you know, perhaps this person over here, and I really respect his opinion about coding, for example, but I think he's a complete idiot when it comes to healthcare. And over here, you think this guy also knows him, and they agree on healthcare, but they don't agree on coding. So it's like, for myself, it's, you know, like for politics and stuff like that, you know, Republican versus Democrat, you know, people have different people that they respect. So the person who's gathering the most global, shall we say, status around healthcare, maybe someone I say, no, I want to actually do a not operation on anything that he recommends, I want to exclude. And with the social space, it seems like just that one party or another party can kind of pollute a tag space, if you will, and dominate the conversation. You saw that on Dig with all the Ron Paul fans. And it just seems like there needs to be a way, as much as we want to talk about, you know, private versus public, it seems like there needs to be like a series of publics, if you will. And the thing I liked about Wave is the idea of a federation model is built into Wave. And it seems like there needs to be some sort of federation model built into how we talk about, not privacy per se, but how far we want the information to spread.
Okay. I think that's a valid question. I think there's actually a few questions in there. It's how should these trust relationships be federated between different services? And the other question I heard is, should you be able to express these trust relationships and have them reflected in the service?
Well, the part of the question that I found really interesting and something that I think about every day and that the Buzz team is, and Google in general is passionate about solving is an information problem. In you know, thinking he's an expert in one thing and she's an expert in another, and wanting to see sort of that perfect stream of information that, you know, where you see the stuff that you find incredibly relevant and known and interesting experts in things. I think those are the kinds of problems that Google likes to solve.
Where expert is defined by me, not...
Exactly. Well, in that it's personalized and that you see the information that you care most about. And so I think we're very, very early in this space, but that kind of information problem is the kind of information problem that gets people at Google really, really excited. So it's something that you'll see us working on. I can't really say more than that.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Yeah, I want to bring up kind of, I think, a related point to what he just described, which is I actually have different personas. I think I have 4 or 5 Twitter logins, and they do very different things, okay? And I interact with completely different people. I interact with a different set of people on Buzz than I do on Twitter, any persona. And I interact with yet another group on Facebook. Facebook is the gym buddies and friends from 30 years ago. Buzz seems to be people thinking about social networks. And oddly, Twitter is internet marketing. So, so I'm doing that, and I'm sort of thinking, now that I've been doing Buzz for a while, I've been sort of thinking, well, this is actually more of a medium than a place. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I think of Facebook as a place. Buzz seems to be more of a medium. Have you given any thought to this issue, which is I'm actually multiple people, and at times the people I interact with would like for me not to be Jim Bud when I'm, you know, talking about social network.
I think we have a good question here.
Yeah, I think all of you ask good questions.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'll leave that one as an exercise for the reader. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And one thing, this is a common, I think, thing we have to be careful when we talk about, that the ability to link together your different profiles and sources of data doesn't mean you should have everything all into one big lump. Quite the opposite. It actually gives you the freedom to be as fragmented or unfragmented as you want to be. And right now the problem is everything starts out completely separate. So for example, this is something that comes into my mind a lot. When I come to a conference like Google I/O, I run into a lot of people that I've met before. And it's actually kind of a neat feature of the brain that I can remember that I met them before, maybe in a different context, and then make a decision based on the current context and my prior relationship, whether I want to also engage with them here or engage with them differently. And maybe I'll talk to Google employees differently than old friends versus colleagues, et cetera, right? But the point is there's a link there. It's not, oh, you're a completely new opaque identifier in a new database and I have to start from scratch. And I think that speaks to Robert's point as well that he asked earlier, that you're going to want to develop these nuances. And so you're going to want to have that fluidity of not being afraid to go someplace and start over, but still bring in, maybe I want to know who I know on this site and then choose not to share with them. Or maybe I do want to have completely separate accounts that aren't linked together at all, and that's fine too. And actually right now, because there aren't good ways of linking accounts together, sometimes people have to resort to these more heuristic methods. And that's actually, that's when privacy lines can get crossed, right, where you didn't want things to be correlated. But if you have an explicit way of saying, here's how I want things to be correlated, then it's much more explicit that when those aren't there, you don't want them to be correlated. And so I think that's actually going to help both sides of the industry.
Just one other thought about this is, it's not only what you want, what you decide, it's also what your friends decide. So if your friends have decided that they're going to be on Facebook and they're doing internet marketing on Facebook, but you want to be socialized on Facebook, that's kind of a problem. It's hard to make this work since it's actually two ways. And so I think that having mechanisms, and especially common mechanisms, that let users decide, let people decide how they want to present themselves to the world and not have it be tied to the service is really important, especially as as everybody gets on these services and people start to use them for slightly different purposes. I don't think that the services can all align with everybody's social desires. I don't think it's actually possible. I think they can help people present themselves the way they do in real life, where they have real social connections and they can make intelligent decisions.
And just one thing that I think underlies what John's speaking about is what we all need to do, not just Google, is provide users the tools in which to both develop these social spaces and also understand what's going on the web. So you think about the different networks and how they're linked. We need to surface that and make that relationship transparent to empower the user to make smart choices. We always want them to have informed consent when they participate in these environments. And what's interesting about it is, I would actually rather, I hope this isn't too controversial, I would rather Google, okay, so you could imagine a world in which there were 1 million small social networks and they all worked pretty well together. I would rather that world than Google be, have 1 billion users and be the dominant social network. And I think that speaks to our need to, let our people, us, have those different spaces to use as they will. So.
Cool. Thank you. So Mark, hello. You have a question?
I sure do. So we talked about improvements in the Buzz API, things like groups. We talked about bringing these things together. How do you intend to advance the industry by engaging things in like open social, which you guys were very active in, to bring the industry together and forward, not just Buzz?
That's a good question. There was a similar question before you came in, and I referred back to your previous session actually as part of the answer. I think no, that was not a that was a plus. That was a part of the answer. I think is something that Sami has talked about a bunch, which is the idea with the Buzz APIs, and DeWitt was hitting this point a lot, is that they are standard APIs, that they are open APIs, they're based on open standards. And where that's not true, it's because we didn't know how to take the standards as they exist today and solve the needs of Buzz. And every time that Sami and his team did something that wasn't lined up with an existing open standard, they did it with the intent of saying, we think this could become part of the standard, and we commit to changing the Buzz APIs to match the correct standard once it stops moving. I think I early on had a conversation with DeWitt and with Sami about this, and I started black and white because it's easier, and said, why don't you just implement the standard? And they said, because it doesn't solve the problem. And I said, okay, well, what fraction of it does? And it was roughly a third, a third, a third. There was a third where what the Buzz API needed to do to expose Buzz was well spoken to by some existing standard, and for that, just used it. And there was another third where it was, well, you know, what the Buzz API is doing is an area that just isn't spoken to by any standard. It's just, you know, greenfield, and we're going to invent something that feels like it's a good proposed extension. And then there were another area where, for some complicated reason, and each one off, we can't do it the way the relevant standard says, and we need to propose that the standard move towards, you know, something better. And that's been the plan, and I think you know, something we've tried to be very clear about in the messaging to the Buzz API early users is this is going to change, because it's going to change to become more standard with some combination of the API moving and the standards moving to come together.
And then the other thing I'd just add to that really quickly is there's no Buzz protocol. I mean, very important that we position it this way, because this is how we're building it. There's Buzz the product. It's the thing you see in Gmail. There is the Buzz API, but that's really just the collection of other protocols. And with regards to Open Social, we managed to pull together with Open Social an industry. I mean, there are so many participants. We managed to get IBM and MySpace and Yahoo and all these, I mean, really hard to get together people in the same room. Everybody got in the same room, and we not only agreed on a actually really impressive specification, but we agreed to a governance model. Like, how can all of these companies work together to build, you know, common intellectual property? I think that's pretty, you know, phenomenal. What I hope to see is that, you know, what we're doing with the protocols around Buzz or Wave or all these other products, they will get folded into Open Social, you know, well, and vice versa.
Yeah, just quickly add, one of the things I'm most excited about from the Open Social perspective is I feel like Open Social actually designed a pretty good set of RESTful APIs, which is how you interact, you know, across different sites with Open Social sites, and yet they didn't really get their fair share of the attention early on because there was so much focus, as David said earlier, on the in-app experience. But Buzz is also trying very hard to do that cross-site interoperability, and it's no coincidence that the Buzz APIs look a lot like Open Social APIs, sometimes exactly the same, sometimes a little different. And in particular, we always knew that the activities part of the Open Social RESTful APIs were a little primitive and a little weak because things like activity streams really hadn't matured yet. And I'm hoping that since that's sort of the core of what Buzz does, it's really going to help us get that right and in turn inform Open Social. And because we designed them similarly, that translation of technology is going to be really simple. So that's the kind of the way we're thinking about how to make this all work together.
Just making that tangible, I would love to see Open Social 1.x RESTful API be exactly the same as what the Buzz product supports at the time that that API exists. And that will take movement on both the product and the API, but that's very much the intent, is have that model of API governance apply.
Yeah, cool. Next question.
Hi, I love Buzz, thank you. And I am just wondering, there are people I follow who bring up topics that I'm not particularly interested in, similar to what somebody else mentioned, I think. And I would love to be able to use the same kind of filtering that Gmail already has, specifically on Buzz, so that I don't filter out an entire person, but just, I don't want to hear all the political stuff, or I don't want to hear the abortion debates, or whatever. And are you going to be doing that?
Right, like, so from Joseph minus political, or filters of that power. Yeah, no, it's a great suggestion. We are working on various ways to filter. That would be one of the more powerful ways of doing it. I actually hadn't thought of that.
It'd be cool if you could do like topic-based clustering and actually try to guess, does this sound like political speech, kind of like Google News did or something?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe we have some like smart machine learning people we can throw on that.
Why can't we tag items with political?
Yeah.
That way her filter would filter
That could work too.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah.
So I wanted to come back for a moment to talking about correlation and privacy, because frequently as we imagine how we can make these systems transparent, the management of them becomes incredibly onerous. right? It's like if I want to go to Facebook, for example, boy, can I tweak every setting, and it's unlikely that I ever will, and frankly, there are times where you're pretty sure they're gaming on that. So I guess the question that I would put is, how would you imagine that we can actually have that transparent, informed consent as not only we're coming into a more and more complex social world on the web, but as we're discovering new uses after the fact. So after I've gone through and managed it very carefully, oh, you've just invented a new way to use that data.
There's no simple answer, but a couple of thoughts. One is, it seems to me that you're going to have to start to have tools that help you manage some of this stuff, and the interoperability in open standards is kind of a prerequisite. So here, let me give you a good example. As I mentioned earlier, I recently moved from Plaxo over to Google. And I'm a pretty with it savvy tech guy on the web, but I can't tell you the number of websites that still say I work at Plaxo, because I don't even remember all the sites I've signed up for, let alone had a chance to change my job title on all of them. Now, I wasn't doing that because I wanted to have multiple personas. It's just broken. And if those sites all supported a kind of basic APIs, one place you might look is, the Mozilla Labs guys have been doing great work, and they have the specification of an account management API where a site could describe, here's how you programmatically log in and log out, here's how you programmatically change basic account information. If you imagine something like that existed on all those websites, maybe my browser or a website could help me see all that and change all that information in one place. And you could imagine doing similar things with privacy settings, right? If you could make the privacy options portable so that, for example, if I block somebody on one site, maybe that should follow me to another site, which of course then means I have to know that it's the same person on another site. So you just can't solve any of those problems without these standards, but once you get them, there's all kinds of wonderful value adds like that on top that you could build. And maybe this will be a place that smart browsers can really help us, because after all, they're the ones who are kind of intermediating that.
Cool. Next question.
Advertising. When does the social team talk to the advertising team? And will we expect to see more about the integration of these technologies next year? Never? One of the two?
That's an A or B kind of question. But what is your general thought?
The principle is the principle. It's going to sound trite, but it really is the starting principle. When we think it makes things better for users, and that is that there are ways to do there are ways those two teams could talk that would be very bad for users, and there are ways they could talk that would be very good for users, right? And that means it's not, we're not going to rush anything in that area, because there's some sharp edges in there, and we're not going to do anything imprudent. But at the same time, it was, I forget which of the CEOs in the keynote this morning said he would prefer to see ads for Lexus than for diapers when he's watching TV. And and I understand that preference, and it would be that's an example, if you could get that right, where you actually could help users a lot by doing things like that. And the advertising team, with things like the interest-based stuff that's going out there, and is dabbling in that to see what's good for users. But the full answer is longer and more complicated, because there are goods and bads.
I would just also mention one of the things I do a lot in my social interactions is tell people about the products I'm passionate about. And that is, that's sort of a form of advertising, and it would be nice if it were easier for me to not only share the products I'm passionate about, but follow products that I care about. And I just had, for example, every time a band I love, I realize, oh my God, they released a new album like a year ago and I didn't hear about it. Like, everybody lost there, right? And so it seems like there's lots of opportunities there that where the two come together very naturally.
Let me ask some questions here to just calibrate people a little bit. Suppose that, and this is completely hypothetical because we don't talk to the ads team. No, this is in the realm of thinking.
Are there advertising people at Google? Yeah. Really?
But this is in the realm of thinking about what are some of the really good and really bad things. Suppose that there were a preference you could set somewhere in your account at Google that said, take advantage of the information on my profile to change the ads that I see. How many of you would check that box?
I'd try.
Okay. Suppose there were an option that said, take advantage of what my friends are doing online to change the ads that I see. How many of you would check that?
That they've shared with me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm being intentionally squishy here, right? But it was interesting. There were less hands. You all had to think is the interesting thing. Okay, here's one. Take advantage of the contents of my email to figure out what brands I might be interested in and change the ads that I see when I'm surfing the web. How many of you would check that box? Only in a very narrow way, you know. Okay, so my point here isn't to actually this isn't market research, right? This is not but I'm just trying to give you a hint of the kinds of interesting questions, right? I was most interested in the speed with which hands did and didn't go up, because I have to think about how I would answer each of those questions, and it depends on the details whether it's a good idea or a bad idea to do each of those.
Cool.
I don't know. I heard ship it.
So, because Buzz is such a new product and we recently had the Buzz API launches, I'd like to ask Todd and Sami to give their closing thoughts on how this has been going. And then we have to stop in about 10 seconds.
Mike, we should probably take his question.
Yeah.
So you caught my ear with the digesting of a corpus, meaning the body of whatever Google has access to. What about something involving maybe like a real-time approach where you have maybe deep packet inspection across given content in real time as opposed to the corpus? And I know you guys serve up AdSense, but what if there was a way to say where I know you are, how I've classified where you may be, what you may be doing, what your gestures might be, and then how that might affect what gets served up? Is that something you might be interested in?
If we could get it right, that would be very useful. I mean, I would love to have ads that were that interesting to me.
Yeah.
And it's harder.
So Todd, any closing thoughts for us?
I would say just from the product perspective of Buzz, you know, DeWitt mentioned Buzz is about 3 months old. The team set a very early goal to be launching a feature a week. And we've hit that rate. We've launched 15 new features since Buzz launched. It's something that you're going to continue to see us do, is actively innovate the product. There's some great stuff coming next week and the week after that I'm really excited about. So keep your eyes open, and we're listening and making the product better every day.
Cool. Sami? Sami.
Yeah. So kind of my thoughts is to reiterate the fact that, I mean, these APIs are young, and we really want to hear your use cases so that we can help you build great apps, great, unique, innovative apps. So please do reach out.
Cool. Well, thank you all for being here. Let's give him an applause. Thank you for coming to the session. Have a good one.